Hi, Steve.
Paul,
Hello.
how are you?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good. Susan, nice to see you.
Good to see you guys as well.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. And Steve, I'll be able to stay for the 20 minutes to review the report, but then I do have to jump off.
Understood.
Double book.
Matt told me to tell you all hi. He is doing a presentation to a talent development group called The Power of Play. Imagine that.
Christy?
All right.
And Susan, are you ready for Halloween?
Yeah, we like Halloween.
I don't get it. What are you talking about?
That's my friend.
Doesn't anybody have a skeleton in their office?
Yeah, some people have skeletons in the closet. I have them in my office.
All righty then.
Nicole was on the other meeting. She was going to jump on.
I'm here.
He's here.
I don't see you.
Fine.
Okay.
There she is.
I like that kind of defiant look.
Very playful of you, Nicole.
Karen is joining us, yes? Oh, there she is right now. Okay.
Did Karen go to a different?
Oh, here she comes. Here she comes. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. My internet decided it was gonna not play nice.
Well, in the spirit of who's that guy? Vin Diesel, who did the Fast and the Furious. In 45 minutes, we're going to be fast and furious, but we're going to have fun. And so you are just returning from Mars, apparently. I'm looking forward to hearing how that went. And I'm going to hand it over.
Died.
Listen, when I went to Mars, I crashed and burned. So, but nonetheless, we're going to hear some of the observations and results from Anastasia here momentarily. When we're done that, then what we're going to do is we're going to start asking ourselves a question, and that question is, what action can we take now to take whatever we think HR Boost is and make it better as a result of all the things that you've experienced, learned, thought about, imagined as a result of our interaction. And then on the other side of that, I'll put together a document. I'm recording this so we capture all your thoughts. I'll put together a document that reflects your thoughts and get that out to you the next couple of days. And between now and Tuesday, if you want to change that, edit it, whatever, we'll do it. But that's what we're going to share with Nicole Martin next week as a result of your journey with us. Fair enough?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anastasia.
Yeah, I'm so excited. My head is spinning apparently, and I'm gonna how am I? No, I'm really glad that you had a chance to do it. That frustration is so normal, and no matter how many times I put some expectations and settings that you don't worry about winning. This is normal. This is supposed to be challenging. I do get quite often when the teams do it. It's like, oh, we crashed and burned. Like this was, we did do so good, and it's totally normal. So I just want to put it out there. And the results I think were very interesting. But before I start sharing my screen and we can kind of review all the data, I wanted to see just any feedback that you have both about the experience and about reading the report afterwards. Any kind of questions you have right now that might help me to kind of focus a little bit more, especially since 20 minutes is not a long time. And so I want to make sure that we capture your needs.
If you guys want me to talk, we had a little bit of a debrief a few days ago, a few of us, and I tried to capture the notes. I can forward it on to you, but we had a couple of notes and kind of agreed on a couple of bullet points about the Mars adventure and then kind of the Play Lab experience as a whole. So Keep me honest, Susan and Nicole, but so the Mars adventure, certainly any additional explanation at the beginning, like being told it's like an escape room. I think a lot of us have done those escape rooms before and realize that you have to talk to each other to figure out that something in this room does something in this room, right? And so just knowing that mindset ahead of time might have been helpful. We appreciated the challenge. We understood that we might fail and we were okay with failing, but it was a little deflating. It got to the point of like, what are we doing here? What's the point of this? And so with that being said, taking the assessment right after those feelings probably wasn't the best time to do the assessment. You got our honest feedback. We'll all admit to you, but it probably wasn't the best time at that point when we were in the like, what's the point of this kind of thing. The written assessment, it may not have been as accurate or as insightful as maybe we thought. We certainly understand it's computer analytics that's doing it and analyzing our interaction and who responded next to each other, right? Like we understand all of that. We felt we worked well together. And also it was kind of interesting, the person who interacted the most, we all thought we were that person. So that was kind of an interesting, and I'm sure you'll get to that page and we'll talk about that. It may have been helpful just technology wise at the very beginning, if maybe you were on the call, because someone had accidentally clicked twice. So they were in it twice and we had to kind of figure out, we had to all get out to reset for them to, I don't know who it was. And none of us did it on purpose, but we didn't start for 15 minutes. And so that there was like, oh, come on, like, what are we supposed to do here? So maybe if we could talk for the first 5 minutes to like, we're on, we got it. Now shut us off. If we need to analyze, that might've been a little bit better, but starting 15 minutes late due to some technical issues, is never really a good thing. And that was it. That was kind of our thoughts on that. Did I capture things well, or?
No, I feel very much so.
Good feedback, yeah, and I think all of it is very valid, and both the initial kind of technical things, and so like finding ways how to get you guys set up before, maybe even with the support from somebody from one of us would be a really good way to solve some of this, because I find that no matter how much instructional language you put, there will always be a little bit of that confusion initially, and so I think kind of setting up probably is really important. And then the escape room stuff, again, it's a good feedback, and we can just put more language around that it is very much discoverable and kind of finding clues and things and collaborative. So we can even strengthen that language. So I think that's great feedback. Without further ado, let's look at your data, because there are some really positive things there too. So I wouldn't, necessarily. There are a couple elements that I do want to highlight as a area of potential awareness and also an opportunity, right, for growth. But I do want to highlight some of the things that you do well as a team and something to celebrate. So I'm going to share my screen if I'm allowed to.
You are.
All right. And so this is what you should have received in the PDF format. So the first page is basically just more of a composition, and then we introduce this idea of a network analysis. So network analysis is an interesting thing because it really can give you at a glance an idea of, in this setting, so that's definitely a really good point, that in this environment, unfamiliar, potentially a little bit stressful, frustrating, right? For some, like how does your communication flow in this particular situation? And we very much understand that there could be many different situations and circumstances where your communication pattern would be different, right? But specifically in this environment, you have a fully interconnected network, which means everybody talk to each other. But I do see that we kind of have these two circles that are connected by person number 3. I know that you had a key, so you probably know who's who. But for now, just to not get distracted of what specific role each person plays, we do see that person number 3 kind of has a little bit more of that leader role here, right? Because they're kind of a connector between different groups. And we don't see, for example, person 5 directly connecting with person 1, and then the same way with 4 and 2, and other way around, right? And well, one of the questions I think was raised of, well, we thought that we all communicate roughly equal, or so the way the analytics works is when you're mentioning somebody's name, right? And so these particular interconnections are really when person 5 says, hey, person 3, da da da, like, did you see this? So this is how we capture some of those direct connections. So of course, then if you have more general statements, then it wouldn't be captured as much, particularly in this network analysis graph. So this report, I guess, what this analytics is really focused on these 3 pillars. So these 3 kind of big areas: communication, productivity, and innovation. And I would say the communication is probably one of the bigger buckets that we cover in here from different angles. And some of it do seem maybe a little dry, like how many messages, and it seems maybe irrelevant at the first glance. But a lot of the research that we've done, and in collaboration with Collective Intelligence Center at MIT, they do find that some of these seemingly irrelevant things, for example, let me jump ahead a little bit into distribution of communication. So this is the just response time, which is also another one really important. So response time is basically how long does it take you when I say, hey, Nicole, I'm looking at this graph, or I'm looking at this hint, and what can you check this, or can you do this? This is a very direct response. How long does it take for Nicole to respond back to me? So this is how we measure this particular statistic, and why we might not have data for some people is because they weren't really utilizing this, specific communication. And so then distribution here, for example, can be an area of improvement, of finding ways to average a little bit more out. And so what the research at MIT found is that it's not necessarily whether you are speedy with each other or whether you take your time. It's more for the dynamic of the group, is whether it's roughly equal. So you don't have people who are like really, really slow, and you don't have people who are taking really fast. So those are the moments that need a little bit of attention, and understanding that when each one of you in the communication find that rhythm of response, then that leads to more of that collective intelligence that we striving towards. So going back here, so we first kind of introduced this proficiency score, right, to make it a little easier and a more normalized way to look at data. So then it's really easy to say, are you kind of in the green zone? Are you kind of need some improvement, right? You're towards that red zone. And one of the first things that we look at is sentiment. So it's pretty easy to understand, right? Like the words that you select in the communication that you're choosing with each other, is it kind of more positive, or is it more negative, or is it sort of neutral? And as you can see, majority of your communication is actually neutral. So that's only 6% had some kind of sentiment to it. Majority of it is neutral. Of course, we would like to see a little bit more positive engagement with each other, and that just means encouragement, more, and I get it if you're frustrated and then had the 15-minute delay, there might have been less of that than when you normally have in your working environment, but something to think about it, that words of encouragement, kind of motivational thing, just positive, something positive to say can mean a lot within a communication. And then of course, in general, we want to see less of the negative sentiment. But you probably noted here that, I think it somewhere was in the suggestions, that we do find that in a particular critical moments in the game, when, for example, you put in that code, right, and you're trying to, right before, like, everybody kind of submitted their, the right data, and then so you put in the code in, there might be some level at which the analytics would construe it as a negative, but sometimes the communication can be kind of direct and not derogatory, right? Not demeaning, but it still has a little bit of that kind of pushing and direct tone to it, which the analytics could potentially analyze as negative. And so we find that that's not necessarily a bad thing in the teams. In the very specific moments when there's kind of a little bit high level of agency and maybe stress, if the team is very short messages, direct, without much subjectivity, so like without much like emotions and opinion, but kind of more direct, they tend to actually succeed in this more kind of when you have a deadline, when you have something kind of very, very concrete. Sometimes, again, not trying to be too like wishy-washy and kind of like being to the point can be a good thing in the team. But again, for us, unless we like look at exactly what those messages were, we don't know. And so the analytics just analyzes them as a negative sentiment and just something to be aware of. So I would suggest for your particular team, focus maybe a little bit more on the positive sentiment within the communication. So it was only 1% within this game. So no matter how challenging the situation is or how frustrated you are, see if you intentionally find ways to bring a little bit more of that positivity, motivation, encouragement, something that just kind of like shifts the energy of the communication. And I think that could be a positive thing for your team. So I'll pause for a second just to see if there's any immediate questions, and then I can keep going. And then Steve, I would like you to be kind of the keeper of the time, just so that
You have 3-4 minutes. Well, you started at 5. You got 8 more minutes.
8 more minutes. Okay.
I was just wondering if it can detect sarcasm, because some of us are kind of sarcastic.
That's a good question for this group.
And that's the beauty of this thing, because I don't want it to be taken at face value. We had one group, which was a family-owned business. So they were all literally family members, mother, dad, I think brother, sister, and maybe like, I don't know, like a cousin or something like that. And they were very comfortable in the communication. They were using foul language and some other things. But they had other signs within, and we'll get to some of the other data that would show really, really high level of, for example, psychological safety. They were very, very proficient. And so even though they found a language that maybe by most standards is considered not ideal, they made it work for each other. And I think that there was clearly that was part of their kind of culture in a way, right? Using, like you said, maybe sarcasm, of even using swear words. So something for you to just take this and not necessarily fixate, negative sentiment, but more evaluate and remember how you were communicating, how the people were communicating during this setting, and see, hey, does this work for us? And if it does, then you doesn't necessarily need to change it. But if there's an opportunity here, and I mentioned specifically focusing a little bit more on the positive, then that could be a conscious effort to create more positive communication within the culture.
I might add one thing to that. As you all know, sarcasm in a certain setting can create a humorous result. In another setting, it can become a very subtle, toxic, manipulative tool. So if you're going to use sarcasm in the workplace, you have to use it with an intention that both receiver and giver have a familiarity with each other, and anyone else listening, or that can plant seeds of doubt as to the certainty of communication. Does that make sense, guys? Cool.
So if you feel a high level of psychological safety and just understanding within your group, then yes, some of those nuances of communication that might not be standard could totally work for you. So that's where it really is unique for you, and kind of taking this data and kind of understanding, okay, is there an opportunity for us, or is this not really because we're making it work? All right, so moving on a little bit here. So then you get a kind of more of a normalized score here for the sentiment. It's just slightly below 1. So yes, definitely an area where you could intentionally focus on improving, but not necessarily like where it was really, really bad, right? Response time, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. So basically my recommendation is, first of all, practicing kind of more direct communication, as in, oh, I need something from you, Nicole, or I need something from you. So then there's a really clear understanding, what do you need, rather than more general statements. And then focus on kind of normalizing a little bit of that response time. So so then it feels that, otherwise, one person might, who is a little more speedy kind of in your culture, might feel like too frustrated if somebody's taking too long, and the other way around, right? So then this could be an area just to start being aware of. When you send that email, when you need something from your team member, how long does it take them to respond to you? And if it feels like it's not really working for you, it causes some frustrations within your work environment, then that's an opportunity. If it doesn't, if everything feels pretty kind of on average, pretty normal, then I wouldn't pay attention too much to this. And then just specifically on this, it's a little bit on the lower side for this response time, mainly because there is a big gap here on the communication we were able to capture. Some insights here that I'm sure you were able to read on your own time. This is, again, kind of at the first glance seems kind of very mathematical and dry, but really we are looking for a bit more of equilibration here. And again, there was a lot of studies and interesting things that if you're curious, I can send you the scientific papers on studying what qualities are important and contribute to collective intelligence, and that response time and just overall the volume of communication. You want to see more or less equal distribution. So it has there was no correlation with how much. So even if you were all kind of here, so there was not a whole lot of messages said, but you were roughly in the same spot, that's what we're looking for. And then the same with, for example, you were a very chatty group and everybody were kind of on the higher side, that's also totally fine. But what we're trying to normalize is kind of these spikes, and then maybe some people who tend to be on the less of communication.
3 minutes left, Anastasia.
All right. Let me just then jump to network graph. I think that's an important one. So we started talking about this. So typically what we're looking for is we try to see if the entire group was able to communicate to each other, and we don't have a clear silos, individuals that sort of were on the sidelines. So I don't see that here. So everybody, were able to communicate. In this case, through this centralized person. So this, based on our experience, this is a role of a sort of a leadership, at least in this environment. So something to consider. And what we're looking for, I guess, more is that, person one would communicate here. So it will be a little bit more distributed. But other than that, I think that that's a pretty kind of normal looking distribution and communication pattern within your group. And moving on to productivity stuff, this is, I think, some of just, how many messages. So yes, it might not be as interesting, but I want to go into this hidden insights for the sake of time, and specifically the resilience. So in this game, a lot of the pieces were purposely done for us to be able to increase the signal of the data. So basically what might have taken, hours and hours of some kind of interactions, of some, psychological study, we can kind of shorten it in a relatively controlled environment to see if we can spike some of these metrics. And one of them was, there is sort of a relatively easy way for you to fail in this game, kind of on purpose. It's not rigged, but it's a little bit easier for you to kind of get something wrong than maybe not at first time. And that's how we measure basically a failure attempt. And what we're trying to measure is when the team sort of fails, right, or has this, failed attempt, how does the team respond to it? And by some kind of a little bit more complicated formula, how we get to this 1.02, we're basically measuring, does the team respond well to failure, and then they just kind of move on, and then sometimes even increase in their angst and in their kind of energy after failure attempt, so they're even more kind of like, let's go, let's do this. Or some teams tend to kind of get a little bit more paralyzed, and they tend to retreat a little bit. And so to us, based again some of the validation studies with surveys that are done in this space, we were able to figure it out that this highly correlates with psychological safety. So this resilience score that we provide, we really want to see it above 1 to know that your team is comfortable with each other, comfortable with failures, comfortable to communicate if something is not right or there's an issue. Of course, we would like to see it higher, and some of the teams that we've seen like really, really shine, this score would be definitely higher and getting close to that 1.5. But that, to me, it already shows that even though maybe there was a delay in starting the game, there were some challenges and frustrations to kind of even get going and to understand what are you even supposed to do. As a group, you do have kind of that resilience score on that slightly above average, and so I think that, to me, it tells me that all the other pieces can really just come together because this score tells me that you at least feel comfortable. There is no obvious, to me, signs of kind of toxic work environment or like really inability to speak up, inability to voice your opinion. So like, to me, it shows that you guys are ready to, for whatever for whatever day throws at you, and you are able to kind of work together as a group. So to me, that's actually a really positive thing. And then, is there room for improvement? Of course, but I've seen definitely the score under 1, and it's not even linear. So if you kind of start seeing like 0.9, then we see a drastic change in other metrics as well. So for me, kind of seeing this above 1 is actually a good indicator and a positive thing that your team can feel good about, and of course learn how to improve even more on creating a positive environment that you feel safe around each other to voice things that that need to be addressed, that need to how we can make each one of you feel good and safe and appreciated and able to contribute. So with that, even though there is a little few more scores that are here that I would like to talk about, but I think that this is the high level of, in this time that I was able to have. So I think there's a lot to celebrate too. And then of course, there's also opportunities for growth.
Thanks, Anastasia.
Of course.
Guys, let's take it to the next level. And I know Anastasia has to go to her next meeting, so thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And let me say, as I hear the results of that report, it doesn't sound surprising to me because you're a fast-paced work environment that.
Oh, you're on mute, Steve. You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
All right, that better?
Yep. Nope, you're on mute again.
Oh, hang on. I have a touch screen and something is messing with it. So let me make sure I turn that off. Okay, that should be off. All right, am I better now?
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, every now and then you get like a fingerprint on your touch screen and it overrides your mouse. So sorry about that. So what I'd like to do with the last 20 minutes is remind you of what we started with. When you got into the mobile app to start with, early on, it asked you about 4 or 5 things: workplace well-being, protection from harm, connection and community, work-life balance, and mattering at work. And then as you started going through the materials, we got you thinking about things differently, utilizing play, talking about some of the things we asked you questions about in the questionnaire I sent you last night. And I haven't even looked at that info yet, because that info is designed for us to put in a report that we'll give to all of you, along with what comes out of the next few minutes. And so I think the single great, and by the way, Karen, you'd mentioned you have some thoughts about the overall experience. When we're done on Tuesday, we'll send each of you an additional type form to fill in, because we want all those thoughts. Remember, this is a one big giant experiment. And the overall goal is, how do we take care of people at work? And, you know, there's not a lot of people having that conversation intentionally, and that's the only reason Play Lab exists. So we're very much will appreciate any and all feedback you give us. But in this moment, let me ask each of you, one of the last questions on the questionnaire that we gave out was, if there was one area that you would focus on now, if you were the CEO.
Uh-oh.
Oh, good Lord. I'm gonna have to keep my hand on that mouse, I think. I don't know why that's happening. What would that, oh, there it is again. Yeah, I'm gonna have to keep my hand on the mouse. What would that one thing be? Who wants to go first?
Don't all speak at one time.
Could you repeat that again? Because I think
Yeah.
you were on mute during
It
that whole
cut off.
sentence.
Hang on. The one thing would be, if you were the CEO right now of HR Boost, and there was one action you could take to ensure the mental well-being of people in your workplace, what would you do that you don't currently see present?
Well, I think
Too many- Go ahead.
that was kind of the question in the survey. And if I remember my answer correctly, it didn't say mental well-being, but it said, if you were the CEO, what would you do? And I think I put something to the effect of, you know, one action item could be have monthly, bi-monthly, all hands meetings where we talk about new laws, make sure we're all on the same page, make sure we represent HR Boost correctly, number one, and number two, talk about standard hours, and are we where we want to be, and do we need to, you know, adjust some folks one way or the other. That I thought would be one tangible way to, that kind of does help mental health for those who are anxious about new laws, and how do we put those into practice for our clients, and are we interpreting them correctly? And number two, if we are way overwhelmed with our number of clients and the number of hours for that moment, there are some people who want more hours. How can we help divide that up a little bit better? So that was the one action item that could be implemented tomorrow that I think might be helpful.
I
So
love
if I'm hearing you right, you would be talking about work-life balance, correct?
Right, which would help the stress and anxiety and mental well-being.
Yeah, I think it's right, Kieran. I think by organizing that, then that outcome would be a better work-life balance. You know, from my end, I put somehow, and I think it kind of dovetails with what Karen has said about, you know, laws, regulations. It would be really limit these emails we're getting, because the emails do come to us, and it has been said, well, when we send an email relative to this new law, regulation, whatever it might be, but there's just so much volume of emails, and it's deciphering at any moment in time, do I have time now? Oh, and gee, we have to watch our number of hours that we have to allocate. So how well informed can I be if again I'm getting these emails and yet I'm putting in too many hours? You know, it's just wow. I mean, it gets some organization and some deliberate focus and intention on communication.
Is that a shared feeling, guys, that you have a ton of emails?
Oh, yeah.
I know I experienced that in my work environment. and unfortunately, most of them are they're external. They're from solicitors that I never even talked to. Let it, drives me bananas. But you're receiving them internally regarding the law. Is that right?
We're
Nicole
receiving
has some that auto
we're
forward.
receiving internally and externally. And externally, a lot of it comes simply because from any consulting firm, you're trying to build your business. So therefore, you're out there pulling the net of providers. And so we're kind of catching some of that wave as well. So
Sounds like it's a
that's
lot.
my take.
Where would you ladies put that? Is that also a work-life balance issue? I mean, when I think about, maybe it's a communication issue for sure. So there has to be a way that maybe all that's filtered and siloed and you only get the things that are really relevant to you. Yeah.
Right, but it's not.
Yeah. So that becomes another burden on your time.
Yes.
Well, many of us have our HR Boost email, and then we have client email addresses, and then we're part of their HR inbox. So we just get bombarded, and you have to read everything that comes in because you don't know if it pertains to you or not. So it's just, it's a lot.
Yeah, that honestly gives me a little anxiety thinking about it.
It gives me anxiety too.
Okay, who's next? Thank you, Deborah.
I think
we have anxiety.
You
mine
do?
is kind of, I think, encompasses all of it. Is just that I think that a lot of times leadership is too overarching rather than in the weeds with us, and doesn't understand what we go through in the weeds, and therefore doesn't exactly is leading from a place of not knowing, whereas she should be depending more on the people that do know if she's going to be doing, speeches and going all over the place and all of these things, and be more sales and getting the business and the things that she does that are great for the business, but that keeps her a bit further removed from the people who are doing the actual work.
It's interesting you say that because we as a team kind of talked about my interactions with you guys, because I've kind of been point on this, and then their interactions with you, and then the data you're giving us, right? Like as an example, just a little less than half of all of the PlayLab Pulse entries were positive. So 51% of them were negative, and only 8 people out of 33 participated, right? So that could mean a lot of things. It could mean, other people are also going too fast. It could mean that the organization is tone deaf to this issue, which is highly possible because your leader, who cares about you enough to have done the program, is also so high speed, it's hard to get a hold of her or slow her down so she understands what's going on. Is any of what I just said inaccurate? Yeah, and that's just observation, right? So, because the really cool thing about you guys is no matter how hard I tried to find something really agitating, like toxic bullying or a use of sarcasm to an extent that was too much, or glass ceilings, right? Like this is the type of work environment that mental health issues are insidious because it's hard to detect, because mostly you're nice people, right? And I don't say that like as if I've even identified someone who's not nice. It just means mostly you all show up nice. But showing up nice is not insurance that you all have great mental health. Several of you through this process have alluded to coaches, therapists, and programs you do to support that, which means that whether we see it or not, or make space for it in the workplace or not, it exists in all of us. So, Nicole, that's a really good observation. 2 more, right? I've heard from 3. Who's left? Oh, there we go again. Who's left?
Well, I'm on board with what Nicole said. I think that it would be really helpful to have like a once a month all hands on company meeting to discuss new laws, what's coming up, things we have to be aware of, and just hear, have just someone really dig deep and kind of present. So we're not all doing the same thing and using the same amount of time to research the same laws. I think that would be very helpful.
Yes, and I agree. I think we don't use technology enough to help us. Like if we had a platform that we all could go to get information, I think it would help speed up things when you say the employment laws and all of that, because we're getting it from so many different resources. To have like a place where it's housed and everyone understands and agrees that this is, the interpretation of it, have a meeting, discuss it, that kind of thing.
So next Tuesday, and it's an hour-long meeting with Nicole. I'm gonna ask you guys to join us for the first 30 minutes.
Oh, you're on mute, Steve.
Just be willing to share, very candidly, your experience through this program. And if that includes the criticisms. There's a real benefit to a touch screen, but this is not one of them. I don't know what goes. All right. So, with that said, I'll get you out a little bit of a recap before the day's over. Give me your individual or collective feedback by the weekend. And then we'll see you all next Tuesday, where we'll have kind of a show and tell of what we experienced. Fair enough? Thank you so much for your participation. We're learning a lot. We have 5 or 6 companies that are very interested in starting this program with us the first of the year. And you guys have been an enormous help. And I hope some way we've been able to help you as well, because I think I've met wonderful people here at HR Boost, and every time I meet with Nicole, I love her, but I'm also aware that she's a very busy person. So see if we can slow her down so effectively you all speed up without the anxiety, right?
Yeah. Don't slow her down. Let her do what she's good at. Let her be the face of the business and get the franchises. She needs a COO type person to run the business, the day-to-day business, because she doesn't have time for that anymore. She's way above that. So I know she's at that. Now I know we're being recorded and I trust this is a safe place, but I know she's heard that before. She needs a COO where she can be the face of the business and do her stuff, but the nitty-gritty day-to-day, how do we run our clients?
Yeah, right. It's no different than any consulting firm needs an infrastructure. The infrastructure is missing. You just can't have like the booster field, you got to have an infrastructure and the leader that has the time to support the infrastructure. That's what's missing.
I completely agree with that. And I would ask you one last question. I want to make sure I understood this correctly. Earlier in our process together, I think, Nicole, you let me understand that she is the sole lead generator of the business. Is that correct?
Not sole, but she's the main one.
Okay. So the majority of the business that all of you process is dependent on her getting it, more or less.
Well, I would say it's dependent upon the systems and processes she puts in place that creates the channels of the leads. Then you take it to the next level, which is the HR business partner, to the extent that we can, excuse my expression when I use this, guys, I don't mean to be offensive, but to the extent we can lock and load. And I'm hesitant to use that because, of the culture change, but it's lock and load. In other words, we get the leads and it's capability of where we can get them, we can romance them, and we can lock them in. And then here comes the team. We load them with the talent that all of you on the phone, what we're about. That's the component. If we didn't have that lock and load, I don't care how many leads keep coming in. You got to have that piece, and that piece we have. But then when we get into the load, it's whoa, that's all that other kind of stuff Karen adequately put in terms of, the whole issue of like the hours and the allocation, and from Nicole Selecki, the laws, the regulations, so that we are not all spending, and I think Sue, you brought it up, the same amount of time to unravel an Illinois legislation of sick time that's effective January 2024, when so many people, everybody was working on it before we could all get on the same page of how to help our clients.
If I made this generalization, would you all agree with it? HR Boost is a nice place to work. It's a very high pace to work, a very high speed pace to work. And generally speaking, there's not much time for mental health awareness. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
I think I would say it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Because remember, our goal is, just like Anastasia said, none of this stuff is designed to say, oh, you're good, you're not good. It's not to polarize us. It's just to heighten the awareness and ask the question in the discussion, does HR Boost support mental health or not? And if it's or not, there's, and I hate to say it this way, but there's no gray on mental health. Either we're actively working on it, or our silence has a way to support it not happening. Does that make sense to you? Saying nothing is actually doing something harmful, because in general, the discussion about, hey, Karen, how are you? You say, I'm good. And I say, no, Karen, how are you? Right? Like those kinds of engaged interaction. Or, Nicole shared in this group that she uses therapy. Hey, how's that going? Like, it matters to me to know that you care enough about yourself to address the things in your life. And I absorb a lot of YouTube content because we're getting ready to, in 2024, put a campaign into the YouTube world. And I'm really fascinated in a good way by how many more people are talking about what they're actually doing to level up their own mental well-being. So I think, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna miss you guys. However, I'm also gonna talk to Nicole about, what's she gonna do about it? And she may or may not hire us to some degree to support you, but along the way, with your permission, we'd love to keep you all in touch with what we're doing, because we're creating individual programs as well as group programs. And I'll leave it at that and see you all Tuesday. If you have questions about the information I send you, what I'm going to take here is what I've heard, and then you guys are going to have a chance to say, here's some areas of action we could act on. And Nicole, you as the CEO have to, hop into this with us or give us authority to do it. And, it's a chance for her to look at her organization differently and see how she can invest in the people, which, as you know, is always a great investment. Any last comments from each of you? Going once, going twice, and my mouse seems to be fixed. Thanks so much, ladies. I'll see you Tuesday, and I'll have some stuff for your review tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello.
Bye.